Hello learners, today in this session we are going to discuss on Sustainable Livelihood Security Index. In previous different session we have looked into different concepts on sustainability and sustainability indicators. So today we look into the basic of Sustainable Livelihood Security Index. So I will not go in detail about your indexes, about the concept of indexes. By assuming that you have already looked into the basic concept and definition of different sustainability indicators. When we talk about Sustainable Livelihood Security Index, first it comes the word livelihood security. When we discuss on livelihood security, when you are trying to understand the concept of livelihood security, first comes in our mind is the poverty. As you know, poverty has been defined by different organizations, but in a nutshell, we can say that internationally poverty is defined as those group of people who earn less than $2 per day. So that's those group of people are defined as people under the poverty. So defining poverty, it is defined in different parameters, and you know its eradication. Eradication of poverty means attaining the livelihood security. Then what is livelihood? When you talk about livelihood, livelihood is when you understand the term poverty, that's reflected the meaning of livelihood also. Is a means of securing necessities of life. Then another term comes security. And security is a very common word which nowadays we're talking in day-to-day life. What does it mean? In a simple word, it is the state of being free from danger or threat. When we link that meaning of security and livelihood, what it indicated? It indicates or it's reflected that livelihood security that can be understood as the access to income and resources to meet basic needs. Means they should be free from danger or threat of basic needs. What will make them free from those danger or threat of the basic needs? That is livelihood. What is livelihood? That it is income. So livelihood security is the access to income and resources to meet those basic needs. If we look into conventional approach to poverty eradication, you will see that it focuses only on certain aspect or manifestation of poverty characterization. That provision of access to the three basic needs of human, as we say that are food, clothing, and shelter. These are the very basic needs, which in India and across some of the most of developing countries, there are a number of people who do not meet this particular basic needs of food, clothing, and shelters. And if you look into a number of research carried out, and if you look into the present contemporary research, you will find out number of research related to policies on poverty. Their sole focus on those research are on providing food security, and it is found that whenever those research, when they carried out on policies with the sole focus on providing food security, it found that it is, and when we talk about those perspective of food security only, that is a very narrow approach. and sometimes misleading to treat food security as a fundamental need. And it is independent of wider livelihood consideration. That means they set aside the wider perspective of livelihood consideration. They look into the basic food security only. So the need is to address the other aspect of that livelihood security. It is in this way the concept of sustainable livelihood and sustainable livelihood framework emerges. A sustainable livelihood is commonly accepted as comprising the capabilities, assets, including both material and social resources for a means of living. A livelihood is sustainable when it can cope with and recover from the stresses and the shocks, and maintain or enhance its capabilities and assets both now and in the future, while not undermining the natural resource base. It is a definition given by Department of International Development, DFID, UK. So from this definition, you must be able to link up with your livelihood security or sustaining your livelihood with that of maintaining the natural resource, stock of natural resources. Then what is sustainable livelihood framework? Let us have a quick look into that. This sustainable livelihood framework, it is an approach that provides a holistic understanding of the livelihoods of the poor. It centers on the assets of the poor and on how they can increase their ability to withstand shocks to their livelihood. When we talk about the assets, there are 5 assets. They are the natural, the physical, the human, financial, social capital assets. The access to and the interaction with such 5 basic assets determines the livelihood of those involved. So in this context of livelihood security, a defining movement was adoption of household livelihood security as a framework for relief and development in 1994 by CARE, an international organization. Because when we talk about livelihood, the basic fundamental beginnings of understanding your livelihood, understanding your poverty is at household level. So household livelihood security is defined as adequate and sustainable access to income and resources to meet their basic needs. What are their basic needs? That include adequate access to food, potable water, health facilities, educational opportunities, housing, time for community participation, and social integration. This definition is also given by the organization CARE. When we look into this definition, now we are able to understand the definition which used to give by different authors from policy perspective of livelihood security as food security. Because in its broader context, when we talk about livelihood, we should not talk about only food, we should talk about other component, which vary much. So that's why Professor M. A. Swaminathan, the father of Green Revolution in India, has defined sustainable livelihood security as livelihood options which are ecologically secure, economically efficient, and socially equitable to underscore the 3 aspects. What are that 3 aspects? That is ecology, economics, and equity. This concept of SLS, sustainable livelihood security, has both macro and micro level implication. While the macro level prescription for ensuring sustainable livelihood security include stabilizing population, reducing migration, fending off core exploitation, and supporting long-term sustainable resource management. And if you look at the macro and local level, the critical ingredients of this sustainable livelihood securities are adequate stock and the flow of food and cash to meet the basic needs. See, this is very important point. adequate stock and flows of food and cash to meet basic needs. And second is access to resources, income, and assets to offset shocks. So we know that the SLS concern that at micro and macro level, it clearly indicates the immediate relationship between what sustainable livelihood security and sustainable development. Especially if you look into in this particular SLAs, when we look into this developing countries like India, that is highly significant. Moreover, the macro and the micro prescription of sustainable livelihood security are also consistent with the principle of sustainable living, which is identified by the different international organizations like IUCN, UNEP, WWF, etc. The population growth and the migration, it could be managed mainly through economic development. And other, the exploitation means the social exploitation, it can be eliminated only through greater equity in income distribution, assets ownership, and access to natural and technological resources. And sustainable management of resources hinges critically on ecological security. It is in this view of these rationalities, that is population growth and migration issues, social exploitation issues, and sustainable management of resources, Professor Swaminathan identifies that the three basic conditions that are crucial for achieving sustainable development in general and sustainable livelihood security in particular, whether at the household level or ecosystem level or regional level, or it may be in global level. They are ecological security, economic efficiency, social equity. The conceptual linkages between sustainable livelihood security and other modern welfare concepts, including sustainable development on the one hand and the policy linkages between these concepts and their major determinants on the other hand, you will see that is clearly depicted in this figure. And you will see this particular concept in your study material also as figure 3.2. Here you will find that the basic livelihood is an important component of human development that forms an important component of quality of life, which in turn is a critical factor underlying sustainable development. You just look into this figure. At a subsequent stage, the concept becomes broader, including other aspects. For instance, sustainable development implies, besides a reasonable quality of life, ecological security and social equity. In this sense, the regeneration of sustainable and secure livelihood, it is the dominant welfare goal of sustainable development. The concept of sustainable livelihood security captures in itself not only the requirement of basic livelihoods, means the basic needs, but also those of human development and qualitative improvement in standard of living. See, in this figure you will see the conceptual linkage of this between SLS, sustainable livelihood security, and other welfare concepts are bolstered further by the commonality of their determinant. The common factors influencing fundamentally these interrelated welfare concepts are, you will see here, population, environment and natural resources, and science and technology. And you look into the feedback effects and the causal linkage between the welfare concept and their determinants are indicated by the two-sided arrows. Poverty, the major outcome of livelihood insecurity, is to do with more than the mere absence of income and the food, but also as absolute poverty is intimately related with the factors like malnutrition, illiteracy, disease, squalid surroundings, high infant mortality, and low life expectancy. Thus, achieving sustainable livelihood security leads to the gradual elimination of poverty. So, the basic objective If we look into the basic objective of sustainable livelihood security is elimination of poverty. Let us look into Sustainable Livelihood Security Index from analytical framework and methodological point of view. When you look into the framework, you will see there are more than 100 and odd definition of sustainable development in the literature. But unfortunately, there are only few that lend themselves to be operationalized at the current state of knowledge and information. In fact, the definition given by different authors, if you look into their definition, you will find out they define sustainable development from different perspectives. That needs to be understood from a holistic perspective. One among them is the three-dimensional conception of sustainable development given by Professor Swaminathan. That focus on the three mutually dependent dimensions. They are ecology, economics, and ethics. 3 E's. So, the conceptual relationship between sustainable livelihood security and sustainable development allows us to define sustainable livelihood security also in a three-dimensional context. What are the methodologies? We'll see the index of I component of SLSI means Sustainable Livelihood Security Index of the Z entity. You will see how it is calculated in this equation 1. This SLSIJ, it is the index for the I component of SLSI related to the Z entity. That is households in a village context it may be project or technologies in a policy option context, it may be uses or practices in a resource ecosystem context, it may be regions in a national context, a nation in a global context. And here Xij, it is the value of variable representing the 8 component of SLSI related to the Z entity. You will notice that the numerator in this equation 1, it measures the extent by which the Z entity did better in the I component of SLSI as compared to the entity showing the worst performance in that component. And the denominator indicates the range, that is the difference between the maximum and minimum values of the variable representing a given component, which is a very simple statistical measure of total variation present in the variable representing the 8 component of the SLSI. So the denominator in fact serves as a scale or measuring rod by which the extent of the better performance of Z entity in the I component is evaluated. So having calculated the SLSI of Ij for all components when I equal to 1 to L and all sample entities J equal to 1 to J, the composite index which measures the overall performance of a given entity SLSIJ can be calculated as a weighted average of all component indices, that is SLSI of Ij, that is shown in this equation 2. So here in equation 2, the Aij denotes the weight assigned to the 8th component of SLSI of Z entity, and it has the property that A1j plus A2j plus up to ALJ is equal to 1. If Aij is identical for all I and j and is equal to 1, it means that an unrealistic system of equal weight is being assumed. So it is in this case the SLSIJ is calculated as a simple arithmetic mean of the component indices. In view of our three-dimensional conception, this SLSI will have 3 component indices. They are the Ecological Security Index ESI, the Economic Efficiency Index EEI, and the Social Equity Index SEI. When there are more than one variable to represent a given component of SLSI, the index for that component can be formed again by taking either the simple or weighted average of the individual indices of the representative variables. So let us look into the empirical illustration of SLSI with an Indian case study. So in order to demonstrate the utility of SLSI as an effective, information efficient and generic tool for evaluation of necessary conditions for sustainable development, that is ecological security, economic efficiency and social equity, the methodology is applied for the evaluation of the relative agricultural sustainability of the 15 agroclimatic regions of India that we are coming what are those 15 agroclimatic regions is based on easily available ecological, economic and social information. Three basic components. The rationality behind selection of all these variables are to gauge the performance of a given region in ecological dimensions of sustainability. The author selected the parameters of forest cover, that is the proportion of the total geographical area of each region under forest, with the recognition that forest cover is not a good and uniform measure of the actual quality of canopy cover. Also, forest will naturally be more in mountainous region but very low in the plains. It means that the critical minimum forest cover essential for ensuring ecological security should vary depending upon the geophysical condition of the regions. If you look into what Food and Agricultural Organization, international organization, that's an international organization as we call FAO, what they suggested the critical minimum forest cover to be 20% for the plains, 33.3% for plateaus and hills, and 66.6% for mountainous regions. Although greater area under forest could imply greater ecological sustainability of the region, nevertheless, it also implies lower area available for the cultivation of food and fiber crops and vice versa. So this indicates the existence of some conflict between ecological security and agricultural expansion. This debate is going on. So to capture this conflict into the SLSI, another variable, that is the percentage of NSA, net sown area, to total geographical area, was also selected to jointly represent the ecological component of the SLSI. So for evaluating the economic efficiency of the agricultural system of the agroclimatic regions, the variable land productivity measure is in rupees per hectare. Although the unit of this variable has the capacity to capture not only the physical performance as affected by social productivity and biochemical technologies like the use of hybrid varieties and fertilizer, but also the economic performance is affected by the marketing and other rural institutional structure of the regions. Nevertheless, it has the potential to bias the evaluation in favor of regions specialized in higher valued cash crop. So to minimize such a bias and to capture the potential for the overall food and the nutrition security of the region, another variable, that is the percentage of NSA, net sown area, under cereals has been selected to adjust and also to augment the productivity variable. To represent the equity component of the SLSIs, two variables, that is the proportion of the people above the poverty line and the family literacy were selected. So the first variable will shed light on how equitable the resources are distributed across the economic and social group. The strength of poverty variable lies in its ability to capture the effects of both the employment opportunity as well as relative availability and distribution of food and other necessities of life. But its main weakness arises from its virtual focus only on economic aspect. Consequently, the poverty variable was augmented with the inclusion of female literacy variable. The magnitude of female literacy could indicate the potential for active social and economic participation by women. You just look into table 3.1, means given in your study material. In this table, it gives the raw values of the 6 variables selected to represent the 3 components of SLSI, that is ecology. Under ecology, you will see forest cover and a net sown area. In economic, land productivity and area under sales, and social equity, you will find out these people above the poverty line and the female literacy. Pertaining to these 15 agroclimatic regions of India during the triennium ending 1984-85, the indices for all the representative variables, with the exception of the forest cover variable, were calculated through a straightforward application of equation 1 to that you will see this equation to the raw information given in this particular table 3.1. These are the agroclimatic zones: Western Himalaya, Eastern Himalaya, Lower Ganges, Middle Ganges, Upper Ganges, Trans Ganges, Eastern Plateau, Central Plateau, Western Plateau, then Southern Plateau, Eastern Coast, Western Coast, Gujarat, Western Dryland, then Island. Okay. So if you look into this figure 3.3 in your study material, it depicts the relative potential for agricultural sustainability status of the 15 agroclimatic zones. So the Sustainable Livelihood Security Index ranking indicates that the region having the best condition for agricultural sustainability is the western coast, Kerala, Goa, and the advanced enclaves of Karnataka and Maharashtra. This is followed by the Transgangetic region, that is Punjab and Haryana. You know, this Punjab and Haryana, the Transgangetic region, where the Green Revolution technology had its greatest impact as compared to the other regions of India. On the other hand, the regions having the least desirable condition for agricultural sustainability are the Western Dryland, that is desert areas of Rajasthan, and the Eastern Plateaus, that is mining and tribal belts of Bihar, Madhya Pradesh and Odisha. It is assuring to note that since the regions with a higher SLI's ranks are those often described as advanced, means backward. Higher means lower SLSI rank, and advanced backward using other economic and social indicators. The SLSI ranking appears to be consistent with the gut feeling impression based on their indicators. So while SLSI gives the overall performance of a region, the component indices is we repeatedly discussed that ESI, Ecological Security Index, Economic Efficiency Index, EEI, and the Social Equity Index. These indices indicate how the region fares in the 3 dimensions of sustainability. You just look into this figure. That is in figure 3.4 of your study material. Okay. Although the western coast has the highest SLSI, its ESI is not the highest. Its Ecological Security Index is not the highest. Also, a comparison of its 3 indices indicates that its ecological security is not as good as its economic efficiency and social equity. This can also apply equally to the Transgangetic region. In the same way, among the least performing region, you just look into this figure, all the 3 dimensions of sustainability need to be strengthened to improve their agricultural sustainability. The relative emphasis to be given to the 3 dimensions need not necessarily be the same. In case of the Eastern Plateau region, for instance, since the equity component is weaker than the other 2 components, distributed policies should receive top priority. So, from a policy perspective, the SLSI methodology identifies not only the regional priorities but also identifies the nature and type of policies to be pursued in each region to enhance their SLS status. While the SLSI methodology is simple and conceptually sound, it faces the same problem often encounter in the construction of many composite indexes, like the choice of the component variables and the identification of appropriate weight for different components. The choice of variables to represent different components of the composite index presents serious problems in view of the variation in preference of planners and policy makers. Another limitation is data limitation. It also naturally circumscribes the choices. Within the data constraint, the variable choice becomes more an art than science. And if you look naturally, the SLSI constructed by two individuals with different preferences will not be the same. And so is the evaluation of sustainability. As to the issue of assigning appropriate weight in the particular context of the SLSI and also other composite indices, the weight can be developed within a linear programming context. The most serious limitation of this SLSI methodology is it provides only relative rather than absolute indicator, that is, it helps only to establish ranking among a given set of entities, but could not say how much an entity performed better than others. Hence, the policy-induced changes in the SLS SLS status could not be measured in any quantitative sense. Also, the SLSI methodology in its present form is applicable only in a cross-sectional context, not in an intertemporal context. However, the advantages associated with the relative and the cross-sectional characteristic of this SLSI methodology, this permits the incorporation of current state of knowledge reflected in the form of scientific rules, norms, standards, targets, and goals into the SLSI. Another strength of this SLSI methodology is its flexibility, the context-dependent nature, and this can be a powerful tool to function as litmus to test for the presence or otherwise of the necessary condition for sustainable development at various interrelated evaluation contexts. So its composite nature thus facilitates consensus among different partition groups like economists, environmentalists, and advocates of equity by balancing their mutual concern. Since the SLSI have to focus on the conflicts and also potential synergy between ecology, economics, and ethics, it's in a most non-technical way, it can also function as an educational tool promoting a holistic perspective among planners, administrators, and people. That's all. So today we have discussed into basic of sustainable livelihood security index by giving an example of Indian context. So with this, let us meet in next session. These are some of the references which the presentation was prepared based on this references. Thanks all.